Welcome to the basketball party. I'm Sam Ekstrom of Locked On Sports Minnesota. We appreciate you joining us today. It's Wolves Talk every Wednesday. We've got the full crew here. We're going to go around for our opening tip and find out what these guys want to talk about today. But first, our show is brought to you by Game Time. Yes, Game Time is a good partner of today's program. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. So much to get into Wolves-wise today. They still have the best record in the NBA, but they're coming off a loss at New Orleans. Any cause for concern? Anthony Edwards still dealing with his hip injury. What is Mike Conley's future beyond this season? I want to pick these guys' brains about that and plenty more. A big week for the Wolves coming up. But on today's Minnesota basketball party, let's meet the panel with our opening tip.
Reggie Wilson, Care 11, and I don't think there's much cause for concern because I think the Wolves are going to take care of business in the West.
And I'm Ron Johnson, former Gopher and NFL wide receiver, but avid basketball player and fan. And I want to talk about the new documentary coming out starring the Timberwolves. It's going to be called Surviving Draymond Green.
I'm Ben Beecken, host of the Daily Locked On Wolves podcast. And similar to Reggie, I feel really confident about where the Wolves sit. Tough upcoming schedule, difficult loss to the Pelicans the other night. But based on how good their defense is, I think the Wolves will be just fine in the West.
I'm Jack Borman, editor-in-chief of Canis Hoopus, and I'll be talking a little bit about why I think the Timberwolves need to find more ways to produce consistent scoring in the backcourt outside of Anthony Edwards.
And I'm Sam Ekstrom. I'm at Sam Ekstrom on Twitter. And my job is just not to get ejected from the podcast. I don't want to pick up any flagrant fouls. I want to be here for my teammates. You can watch this show on Locked On Sports Minnesota. You can also find us on the 24/7 YouTube stream here at Locked On Sports Minnesota. The audio you can find on Locked On Wolves wherever you get your podcast. It's Wolves Talk every Wednesday here on the Minnesota basketball party. And we dive in with the latest Wolves outing. A Monday loss at New Orleans to snap their lengthy winning streak, 121-107. Big Zion game after he took all the arrows, all the heat off the in-season tournament loss, getting blown out by the Lakers. He shows up, scores 36 on the Wolves, and they lose a tough road game where the Pelicans just shot really well, and Zion was really good. They're 17-5. They still lead the West, still in a really good position, Reggie, and it sounds like you're still pretty optimistic.
Yeah, look, they didn't have Ant, and they've overcome Ant before, but they just kind of ran into a team that had a little bit of something to prove, and they ran into a team with this full complement of stars that had CJ McCollum, Zion, as you mentioned, and BI. So they're a pretty good team, and when they are focused, really when Zion is focused, that Pelicans team is a tough out. So I'm not too concerned about that loss. I do think that I would like to see a little bit more production from Cat, as we've seen in the past when Ant and some of the other stars are maybe not playing. Just a little bit more production from him to kind of just put the team on his back. But they just didn't have a whole lot of. I think Coach Finch said that they fought the game a lot. That's what he said, and I think that was probably indicative of what we saw on the court, them just kind of fighting the game and not really getting into like a smooth rhythm. But look, I think they'll settle in, and we'll probably see a better output from Rudy Gobert as well. That was a little last year-esque Rudy Gobert. So I think that game is a little bit more of an outlier than a start of a trend.
Any cause for alarm, Ron Johnson?
No, I don't think there's cause for alarm. The only thing I'm worried about, and I know we're going to talk about this a little bit too, but the next stretch of games all the way. So past this week, but go all the way to the Lakers game. I mean, you got the 76ers, Lakers, Heat, Pacers, Mavericks, Pelicans. And they just played the Pelicans. So when you look at that stretch of games, the only concern I have is, and we've talked about this before, who is going to give you the extra points when you have an Anthony Edwards? I was listening to a couple of the national syndicated talk shows, if you want to call it, like the NBA deal on ESPN and some other ones. And so their biggest takeaway from this was, and even there's like a players show as well, where the players just get on and talk on Sirius XM, one of our partners. And they were all just talking about the fact that the Timberwolves have been the healthiest team. When you think about the number of games they've gone into with their big three compared to other teams, that's been the reason for that. I mean, because they're not trying to say they're the best team in the NBA. They're trying to say they're the healthiest team in the NBA. But I think health is a part of it. If you look at the NFL, you can say that for that's all the 49ers keep talking about. If we had Brock Purdy, we would have been to the Super Bowl last year. So everybody can say, oh, if I did this, if this person was healthy, if this person was ready to go, like if Anthony Davis is healthy and LeBron's healthy, they're one of the best teams in the NBA. Anthony Davis is like the Tin Man or Mr. Glass. He constantly gets hurt nonstop. And so that's the reason why the Lakers seem to have that stretch of games where you don't see Anthony Edwards for weeks and Charles Barkley makes jokes about him. But the fact that the Timberwolves have been healthy, other than his hip pointer Anthony Edwards has to deal with, I think that's the key for me. I don't have a cause for concern. I'm more so of, can they stay healthy without resting? Because I know Anthony Edwards is not a big, I'm not a load management guy, but there is a rhyme and a reason to some of that stuff when you think about an 82-game season, the amount of travel these guys are putting on their body, and then you think about how can you take – and you don't ever want to take a night off on a team just because you think they're not good, but when you look at – coming up, you got the Kings. You can't do it against the Thunder. And then you got the Lakers and Mavs again. You got the Knicks. I mean, technically the Pelicans, Rockets would be kind of the thing, but I want to see this Mavs without Kyrie and what they look like. I don't know if this is a rest-worthy team, but then you can figure that out from there.
Yeah, Ben, we haven't had to dissect a losing streak this year for the Wolves because they bounce back so well. They've had long winning streaks, so you can't really blow one loss out of proportion. But with this schedule coming up, if Anthony Edwards is still out too, you wonder if maybe this team hits kind of its first real adversity of the season. What do you make of kind of where this team's at right now?
Yeah, I mean, they don't play a team with that's not a top 7 team in their conference currently until January 12th. I just looked at this. They're all winning records. They're all teams, Houston and the Pelicans are the closest thing, but like everybody's above 500, a top 7 or 8 team in their respective conference for the next month, literally. And there's 2 back-to-backs mixed in. The Wolves have only had 1 back-to-back. They've had a ton of rest advantages so far. But going back to the Pelicans loss on Monday, I mean, that was the game itself. Like, I'll take all the points that Reggie and Ron have already made, and the game itself was a little bit fluky. Like, it was closer than a 14-point game. Pelicans shot 40 free throws in that game. The Wolves had a strategy to be really physical defensively, and obviously you have to be with Zion. And the officials, like some nights, they call more fouls than others, and it may not have mattered because Zion was so good in that game anyway. Even if you're not fouling him, he still was making everything he was throwing up at the basket, it seemed like. So, like, that happens. And plus, obviously, I think Reggie mentioned Ant didn't play, right? And the Pelicans had their full complement of stars. So the Wolves were actually underdogs in this game. The FanDuel line had them as underdogs. So it wasn't like it was a closer game than it appeared. And the style of defense the Wolves play, they're going to send some teams to the line, and a lot of it's going to depend. Like, and Ron mentioned, controlling what you could control, because you could always make some sort of an excuse. And that's all this is, right? Is the Wolves controlling what they can and limiting the variables, and then weird stuff's going to happen. Like, you're going to have, refs call, in the third quarter of the Pelicans game, the Pelicans attempted 18 free throws. The Wolves attempted 2 free throws. And I'm not saying it's because the officials were having, bias or anything like that. It was just the Pelicans were the aggressors. The Wolves were being aggressive defensively, and they fouled a lot and weren't being aggressive enough offensively. That was just but it was still fluky. Like, you're not going to get that very often. So I'm less worried. Like, the offense, and I'm sure we'll talk about this, the offense was clunky with no Anthony Edwards, but I thought the defense was actually pretty good. Zion was just great, and rebounding was fine. They didn't turn it over that much on offense. Like, all the factors that you normally point to for this team that they struggle in weren't really a big issue. It was more just Zion was great, and the Wolves committed a lot of fouls. And so I think, even though it's a really difficult schedule, I think it would be unfair to expect the Wolves to dominate the next month because they have a really tough schedule. I think we're still going to see them win more often than they lose and be in a really good spot over the next few weeks.
Jack, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, Ben kind of nailed it in the sense that you look around the box score and everything's pretty much identical, other than, the Pelicans got all their scoring from their starters. The Wolves got, half from starters, half from the bench. And the Pelicans were just plus 21 in free throws. And that was the difference in the game. But yeah, I think that, on a night that Ant's out, you see Mike Conley only takes 11 shots. Shake Milton takes 10 shots. Jaden McDaniels takes 12 shots. But all between them, only get 41 points, right? And so that's something that you really need to find a way to scale up when Anthony Edwards is out. I mean, this is, year 4 for Jaden McDaniels, right? I think we saw him take a jump last season, and I think the Timberwolves really need him to take another jump, more than I think a lot of people might realize, because there are going to be nights where Anthony Edwards is going to struggle, right? Like Anthony Edwards, as much as we all love him, is not on the MVP candidate level that Devin Booker or Kevin Durant or Damian Lillard, all these, Giannis, all these superstar scorers that can consistently churn out 30, 33 points a night. Luka that we're going to see on Thursday. So, when Ant does have those off nights, I honestly think that it's a little less on Cat and more on some of the other guards to be able to create open shots for themselves, because, a lot of the scoring in the NBA these days is perimeter oriented, and for good reason. When you think about guys like Shake Milton and Mike Conley, they're not really guys that, can go get theirs. They're guys that more so find their scoring within the flow of the offense. And I think Mike Conley's done a great job of seeking out more shots when he's open, which has been great because he's a really efficient scorer. But I think they really need Jaden McDaniels to create more of his own offense and get, a lot closer to that 15, 17 points per game range than that 10 points per game range if they want to find a way to be successful. Because we saw in this game, Karl was great. He had 15 points in the first half, but he only had 2 in the second half. And obviously that was because the Pelicans doubled Karl for pretty much the entire second half. And while a lot of people, might want to jump on Karl's back for not being able to figure out double teams, like if you go back and you watch that game, guys also have to figure out a way to give Karl an outlet, right? Like when your guy is doubled and doesn't have anywhere to go with the basketball because you're just standing there looking at him, waiting for him to do something, like you got to move and go, create a pass that Karl can throw. And the Wolves just didn't do that a whole lot. And so those are 2 things that I think they're going to need to figure out, because I think we are going to start to see teams double Karl more, especially if Ant isn't 100% or has an off night. So I think the sooner that they can figure out a way to solve those 2 problems, I think, the more competitive and the better they'll come out the other side of this really tough stretch. But I mean, again, that's the benefit of starting 17-4, right? Is like if you went 500 the rest of the season, you'd be 47-35 and undoubtedly hosting a playoff series. So, it's going to be, I think it just kind of takes the stress off of the next month and just allows us as fans and analysts to just kind of, watch and enjoy some really, really high level basketball and find out more about a Wolves team against some really strong competition here.
Yeah, Target Center should be electric for some of these really big home games. And I want to get into something that Ron and Jack in particular talked about, which is complementary scoring. We're going to do that after a word from eBay Motors. Our partners at eBay Motors have teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Basketball host Josh Lloyd to bring you some of the best fantasy picks each week, all season long, whether you're prepping for a daily draft, scouting the waiver wire. Every week, we're going to provide you players that are guaranteed to fit your roster. Let's see who Josh suggests with his eBay's Guaranteed Fit fantasy pick of the week. He's got a few options here, but I think in light of what happened last night, Jonathan Kuminga has to be the play. Kuminga is going to see a bump in time as Draymond Green sees the bench, probably for an extended period of time, with the likely suspension coming after he smoked Nurkic in the face. So while the Kuminga selection with Draymond Green on the roster might have been a little out of left field, I think it makes a lot of sense if Draymond is out for a bit. Kuminga has been a little more active the past couple games for the Warriors, even though they're floundering, and he might see a solid run of minutes over the next week or so. So Josh Lloyd of Locked On Fantasy Basketball is going to help you win your fantasy championship, and eBay Motors knows a championship team is all about each player being a perfect fit, and it's the same, of course, with your vehicle. Thinking about my old 2006 Toyota Camry and all the love that had to go into that and all the parts that had to go into it, and we had to make sure that all of the fits were perfect. And with eBay Motors, over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. Make sure your ride stays running smoothly. It's brake kits, LED headlights, roof rack, bumpers, whatever your car needs, eBay Motors has it. And with the eBay Guaranteed Fit, It's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. And at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. eBay guaranteed fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. So J-Mac is back. The other J-Mac is back. Jordan McLaughlin and Jaden McDaniels are healthy again. Anthony Edwards hopefully is around the corner with that hip issue. So if the Wolves get to a point soon, guys, where they're totally healthy, I want to know what the bench looks like, what the rotation looks like, because a lot has changed. Troy Brown has emerged. Shake Milton hasn't been quite the guy that we thought he'd be. And Jordan McLaughlin, the 2021 version of him was very effective. Last year, not so much. So what role does he play in this rotation? Is he going to hit half-court shots every game? Because that was awesome on Monday. Let's start with Ben and then go around to Jack and around the circle. Ben, once this team gets healthy, what's that bench now going to look like?
Yeah, I think so. Chris Finch generally likes to play a shorter bench. He likes to keep his rotation to 9 guys, and a lot of times we're seeing him play 8 guys more heavily. But I think this is actually the right stretch of games for him to expand to a 10-man rotation, and I think for a couple of reasons. I mean, we've mentioned there's a couple of back-to-backs upcoming. There's one next week. Obviously, Ant's banged up, and the hip pointer is something that it's not just going to get better, and it's going to take, I'm hoping that they give him, half of that back-to-back off. Maybe he won't play against Dallas Thursday. Give him a little bit of extra time. And then when he plays, limit his minutes a little bit to reduce the probability he gets hurt even worse, right? Same with Jaden McDaniels, and a sprained ankle is maybe a little better. At some point, maybe he does hit 100%. But I think it would just be smart to play those 10. And you mentioned Troy Brown Jr. It's hard. It would be hard to just take him out of the rotation because of what he provides. That energy, that kind of do stuff ability is what I like to say on Locked On Wolves. Is he does some of that extra stuff. And it's not as much it doesn't always show up in the box score, but occasionally it does. He rebounds well for his position, some of those things. And Shake Milton's actually playing better too recently. A couple weeks ago, I would have said, yeah, well, maybe Shake Milton's minutes get split up between a couple of other guys, but he's playing better. So I think it's a 10-man rotation in the short term. And then depending on the night and the matchups and who's hot, who's not, who's in foul trouble, who's not, those can kind of, and I'm not saying Troy Brown may only play 10 minutes a game. I'm not saying you aren't going to have 10 guys that are all playing 15 plus minutes. But now is the time to do that, before you get into the dog days of January and February. Keep guys a little bit fresh. They haven't done any load management to this point. And to Jack's point a minute ago, they built up, they don't have a huge lead in the Western Conference, but they have a ton of wins. So, if you can give guys a rest here and there, that's smart. I'm not saying every back-to-back, right? You're not going to do it like what you do with LeBron or Kawhi or somebody like that. But here and there, just give somebody a night. Be smart with it. Keep your bench fresh. So then if and when injuries do happen, they're ready to step in. I mean, Troy Brown went from not being in the rotation to suddenly starting and handled it extremely well, but I don't think you can count on that all the time. So to answer your question, I think it's just got to be a 10-man rotation. And just keep everybody fresh. Be smart with minutes management, even if it's not full-on rest nights. And just try during this tough stretch of the schedule, keep guys as fresh as possible.
Mm-hmm. Jack?
Yeah, I agree completely. I think that on some nights, honestly, it might get up to 11, just based on, whether Shake Milton is playing well or not. I mean, you look at Shake Milton, I believe he's had 29 points in the last 2 games, and he had 35 in the previous 7. So, if he's gonna play closer to the 29 points in 2 games rather than the 35 over the previous 7, I think he makes a lot of sense as that 10th guy. But you also know how much Chris Finch loves Jordan McLaughlin, just with his ability to kind of infuse some pace in the offense, get the offense, into something earlier. And he's just a really pesky defender at the point of attack, right? I think Shake brings, bigger size and length. 6'5", has a 7-foot wingspan, which is important if you want to play a zone. So I think that last spot is going to be pretty matchup oriented. And then I feel pretty confident that Slowmo is should be the 9th guy, and that some combination of Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Troy Brown Jr., and Naz Reid should be 6 through 8, depending on the matchups. You can make a great argument that Naz should be the 6th guy, if the opposing team doesn't really have a strong defensive backup center, against a Denver where their backup center is a 6'8" forward more than anything. matchups like that, I think make a lot of sense to try to get him 25, 26, 27 minutes a game. Whereas I think Nickeil and Troy Brown Jr. now are just going to be, locks in there as guys that, you're going to want to play, somewhat big minutes to in every single matchup just because of what they provide on either end of the ball, which is really important. And then, another reason why I think, Slowmo might make sense as the ninth guy is I think you've kind of seen some games this year where he's been the odd man out a little bit. And, I think if the Timberwolves were to try to do something at the trade deadline, I think he might be the guy, the piece that you would send out, especially if you want to try to, retain someone like Mike Conley. You might try to, see if you can't, turn that $9 million salary slot into something maybe a little cheaper that provides you with more shooting. Also potentially as a means of being able to kind of increase some of that backcourt shooting and scoring that you see. But I mean, if they do keep Slowmo, I mean, he's bailed them out of so many games. And I think that's going to be really important. And I think, it's always nice to have a guy there that you can just turn to and feel confident he's going to make the right play with the ball in his hands. And, it's just a situation where it's like you could make a damn good argument either way, right? And it's, I think his defensive versatility kind of gets counted out when you have that conversation about, well, should he stay or should he go? And that's been really important for the Wolves at certain points this year. But, I agree that it should be, 10 and on some nights, maybe even 11 if Jordan McLaughlin is, going to give you more of a spark than Shake Milton.
Yeah, seems like a good problem to have, Reggie, when you have 11 guys that could make a strong case to play.
Yeah, and I mean, I've been saying it on this show, basically since we started the party that, they probably have one of the deepest teams in the league, super deep bench, and it's a good problem to have. I don't actually envy Chris Finch, though, for having to try to make these rotations work and things like that, but I think any number of combinations just kind of works. Shake was, kind of drew ire of people who were like, yeah, he hasn't really worked out, but it seems like he's coming into his own, and they're going to need him down the stretch to play some meaningful basketball. You got Nickeil stepping in that starting lineup with Jaden being out, and he's an important piece to the puzzle as well. And it is kind of interesting, Jack, that you mentioned Slowmo and him possibly being expendable, because you kind of look at, you look at the box score after a lot of these games, and, out of the key bench players that you would say, it's like, oh, Slowmo is not playing as many minutes as, some of these other guys. And, shout out to Troy Brown Jr. for kind of emerging in that sense and then just kind of making it easy to play him a little bit more than maybe they play Slowmo. But Slowmo is a guy that when he gets in the game, he's efficient. You look at the last game that he played, 19 minutes, 50% from the field, 4 boards, 3 assists, 2 steals, 6 points. Like he's doing what he does, but he's a guy that if any one of those guys goes down with maybe an injury or something like that, he's a guy that you can plug in there and play heavy minutes. So they have a really good problem. Like I said, I don't envy Chris Finch for the rotations that he's gonna have to continue to figure out on a night-to-night basis, but I just think that their bench really just kind of starts and ends with the production of Naz Reid, because, man, that dude is just a spark, man. Whenever you put him in the game, like, he just does work, and he's probably one of the most valuable bench players in the league, definitely from a financial standpoint, but he is a very valuable piece, and as long as they have him going, I think they should be fine with the bench.
Ron, your thoughts on this bench?
So it's a luxury to have this type of ability to look this deep into the bench. When you look at like the Warriors, you look at some of these other teams, and you're like, who is that on their bench? And so it's a luxury, but it's also sometimes a minutes restriction, because some guys need 15, 20, 25 minutes to feel like they're getting involved in the game. Some guys aren't just like Vinny Johnson with the Pistons. That was always the thing back when I was growing up. He was able to cut. That's why they call him the microwave. He was able to come off the bench, limited minutes, and give you 20. He didn't need warm-ups. He didn't need to be out there for long periods of time. He was just going to give you pure baskets, and he's going to go sit down. When you look at the top 30, this was back in October. They had the top 30 bench players in the NBA. Kyle Anderson was considered in the top 30 of all bench players in the NBA. I think he came in at like 12th or 13th or something. And some of the things about him that they said, here it is right here. He was 14th. And they said Anderson's a smart defender, crafty scorer who can fill a role as a secondary ball handler. He's a unique player, basically saying he's not athletic. They were saying because of his lack of athleticism in his shooting, the way he shoots. And so they were just saying, like, despite how weird it looks, he actually gets buckets. He's actually a player. But then, and I think everybody's pretty much hit this. When you add in guys now like Jaden McDaniels, who's giving you key minutes, Naz Reid, because you can flip those two. When you talk about going down to Nah, when you look at Shake Milton, Troy Brown, what they've been giving you, and even Jordan McLaughlin, honestly, I think this is why Chris Finch and head coaches, get paid a lot of money. You have to go into every single game. Anthony Edwards, Karl-Anthony Towns, Rudy Gobert, Mike Conley are your starters, your four. Your fifth guy should always be a guy who can match up with their other guy, because you can't always go into the game saying it has to be like, if you're going into a 3-guard game, you might want to start Nah to say, hey, you're going to guard one of these other guards, or you might want to start Jordan McLaughlin to guard, maybe a point guard if you're looking at the Pelicans with Alvarez and you want to match his intensity coming out the gate versus a Mike Conley. Like, there's ways to get around because you have so many pure weapons and so many bigs. You can have different starting lineups just to say, I want to match the intensity of the team we're starting with. So as far as what this bench looks like, I think it has to continue to be whoever's effective when they come in. If they're on, then that guy needs to keep coming in. Like, he can't, if Nickeil Alexander-Walker is going to give you 20, leave him in the game. Like, this is his night. And then vice versa. If Shake Milton's giving you 15, leave him in the game a little bit longer. Like, you just have to feel the game out. You can't go into it saying, this is what I'm going to do, or this is the guy I'm going to put in there. I think that's how the bench needs to look. It needs to be like Chris Finch can't sit there with the clipboard biting his nails because they just been dominating teams or expecting his guys to figure it out themselves. It's still a young team. Even though Rudy Gobert is there, Anthony Edwards and Karl-Anthony Towns, in my opinion, are still young. They still make young, youthful mistakes. He's got to be that guy to kind of really be a figurehead coach where he's like Phil Jackson or Pat Riley. I'm going to decide who's out there. And I think that's going to be the key for this team.
Yeah, good stuff, guys, on that topic. Next segment goes to Mike Conley. This is a player that I'm very intrigued with what his future is going to be, having a career year for the Wolves in a contract season, and they're up against the salary cap. That's next after a word from Game Time. I was in New York next week, and when you're in New York, there's a lot of events that you can attend. So what did I do? Hopped on the Game Time app. Knicks were on the road. Brooklyn Nets weren't playing. Rangers were out of town. But Broadway didn't really have much going on either because it was Monday, so they shut down. But you know what was going on? Kenny G. Kenny G was having a concert across the border in Jersey. So, Game Time told me. They told me to go to Kenny G, so I went to Kenny G. They've got some fantastic offerings there, sports, music, comedy, theater. It's all there at Game Time. It's such an easy-to-use app, and it helps you with your ticket buying experience. And when you're a new Game Time user, you can get a great deal. Right now, you use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. I took advantage of that when I went and listened to the lovely saxophone of Kenny G. They've got flash deals, they've got last-second deals, they've got zone deals, and they've got a Game Time guarantee to help you get the best price. And if you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference, 110%. And their prices are all in up front. No hidden fees, none of that nonsense. The price you see is the price you get. Again, download the Game Time app like I did. Create an account. Use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Create that account. Redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. You know who makes sweet, sweet music like Kenny G on the basketball court? Mike Conley. Mike Conley is so smooth. Let's look at his age 36 season. He's been in the league for 17 years. He is shooting his best since 2016-17 from the field, his best three-point percentage ever, his best free throw percentage ever, and his fewest turnovers ever at age 36. He's in a contract year, though. It's a little problematic because the Wolves are already over the tax threshold next year. He would still probably cost a pretty penny. Jack, is this guaranteed to be Mike Conley's final year as a Timberwolf, or is there a way that they can get him back in the future?
No, I don't think that it's a guarantee at all. I mean, you had Tim Connelly before the season saying that they hoped, that the Wolves hoped, and Mike Conley hoped that this is the last place he was ever going to play. And that's not to say that he's going to retire after this season. Like Mike Conley has said multiple times, he thinks he has multiple years left. And for the Timberwolves, I mean, the biggest thing is just going to be, what's your willingness to pay, right? In terms of your, in terms of the luxury tax, right? I mean, the main way that you could open this up is you'd probably have to let Slowmo walk in free agency. You'd have to decline Shake Milton's team option for next season. And you'd have to find a new home for Wendell Moore Jr. and replace all of those guys with veteran minimum contracts. So that would save you, anywhere from $13 to $16 million, with Ant and Jaden's contracts rising by a combined $41 million next season. And then you just kind of got to hope that Mike Conley would be willing to re-sign for $8 or $10 million, something in that range to keep a tax payment somewhat manageable in the sense. I mean, the minimum tax payment next year for the Timberwolves, like if you want to bring Mike Conley back, is probably going to be in that $40 to $45 million range, depending on what Mike's contract looks like. And if Mike took, 12 to 15, then that luxury tax payment pushes $50 or $55 million. And then you start to bring in some of the team building restrictions that going over the second apron places on the team, but that wouldn't come until 2 seasons from now. So if they want to be able to keep Mike Conley around, they certainly will be able to. It's just gonna come down to Mark Lowry and Alex Rodriguez's appetite to pay the luxury tax. I mean, all signals indicate that they are willing to do that, especially when you consider that they got anywhere from a $500 to $750 million discount on the Timberwolves when they purchased it. You'd hope that they'd be able to kick some of that savings back into, paying the luxury tax to help maintain the level of play that this team has played at so far this season. And Mike Conley's been really important to all of it. And obviously the hope is that you'd be able to, kind of do what the Vikings might do with Kirk Cousins next year, which is, bring him back on a 1-year deal or a 1+1 deal or something like that, while you can, buy yourself a little bit of time to figure out, what the succession plan might be.
Can they defer the costs of Connelly like they did with Ohtani? Can he take like $2 million and then just pay him later? Does that work in the NBA?
I am not sure if that is a thing. I will look into the CBA and report back to you next week.
Read the CBA and report back. $8 to $10 million would be a pretty big discount, I feel like, when you look at point guards that are paid that money. That's like Amen Thompson, Gary Payton II, TJ McConnell. There's so many, like, there's just so much money in the NBA, right? Like Terry Rozier is making $25 million. Alonzo Ball's making 21. It's expensive to get quality players, or even players that are like borderline quality. Reggie, do you think this needs to be a priority for the Wolves to get Connelly back in the future?
I mean, I would think so. I guess the only thing that worries me a little bit is his age. And also, he's been a guy who's dealt with some injury issues in the past. And so you kind of factor the two of those together and you're like, I don't know. But he is playing some really efficient basketball. And he seems to be the type of point guard that they have been needing all along. I know a lot of people were, upset about the whole Rubio thing. And, I see Ben's got the jersey right behind him right now. And so, he's been kind of like that guy that's been like a steady force. He makes plays, he makes timely shots, and he's just a guy that steers the ship. He doesn't, make it about him. I think he's been the opposite of what D'Lo is and what D'Lo was for the Wolves. And so I think he just kind of steadies things. He's that veteran presence who can kind of get the guys in line as well. They listen to him, And I just think that he's a guy that's invaluable to the team. I just don't want to be Tim Connelly having to try to figure out the money with that, because, you think about maybe 8 to 10 mil or something like that, but that's just not the going rate for, really good starting point guards in the league. And so you would hope that maybe Mike Conley's like, you know what, I really enjoy Minnesota. They call me Minnesota Mike here. Yeah, we'll take a bit of a haircut, but I just don't know that. He hates that.
Yeah,
he hates that. But
that's why he's going to leave. Actually, is the bite.
Yeah, he's like, forget it. They calling me bite. I don't want that. But I think that's something that you kind of have to think about with the money. Like, I don't know if there's enough freeing up space in the world for, the amount that they're going to have to be in the tax to keep this core together. But I'm interested to see what happens. But he is definitely a guy that they, if they could clone him and maybe get somebody like 10 years younger, which I don't know is possible, that would be great. But yeah, he's been a guy that's been wonderful for them since he came over.
And Mike Conley has made almost $230 million in his career. So at a certain point, you might start to wonder, like, is trying to win a title a little bit more important than an extra 10, 12 million at that point?
Yeah, that's valid. That's valid. But if the offer is 25 million versus 10 million, that's a tough one to turn down too. But Ron, I mean, you're obviously extremely familiar with the Kirk Cousins situation, like Jack brought up, and I think it's kind of a similar question. Do you inconvenience yourself financially to bring back somebody that is very consistent and reliable, but expensive?
So yes and no. So yes, you do, because if you think about what D'Lo did, there were games where you felt like if D'Lo just makes one extra pass, or if D'Lo just plays one extra unselfish possession, maybe the Timberwolves have a better chance to win that game. I just want to call out Jack Borman for this one. Don't ever disrespect Mike Conley's $252 million. That's another $22 million you forgot about.
Hand up. My fault, Ron. My fault, Mike.
$22 million is a lot. Mike Conley say, "Oh, don't be counting my pockets, man." Jalen Rose said, "Don't ever count my pockets." Wrong. If you don't count them right. But $252 million. So Jack's point is even better. He's made a lot of freaking money. Like, you've made $252 million over this career. They can extend him. His extension eligibility goes through June 30th of 2024. So they do have time to figure out an extension number. And Reggie's right. If somebody else is like in his agent's ear, like, yo, 24.7 million. And then the Timberwolves are like, man, we got 12 for you. Even though I made 252, what's better than more money? More money. And so for Mike Conley, I think the answer is yes, but I don't think 25 is going to do it. When you look at the other point guards this year, I would not want James Harden. I would like Drew Holiday, but again, he's up in the $37 million range. So can you afford him? No. Now, Tyus Jones, Minnesota native, really smart. You look at his point to turnover ratio when he was with the Grizzlies, had one of the best. He also needed other scorers. We're seeing in Washington, it's a dumpster fire. Who really wants to be around that group of guys in Poole and Kuzma? If you can say, hey, Tyus, you can come back home so you can run your AAU program from Minnesota. Team Tyus can take off and go to new heights. You can jump over Howard Pulley. You can jump over D1 Minnesota, because you're going to be in Minnesota more. And these kids in high school are going to want to come play for Tyus. He's only making $14 million. So they can offer him something like that, $12 to $14 million, or maybe a longer contract, to say, we'd like you to be the Mike Conley of the future for the Timberwolves. You already got Anthony Edwards. You already got karl-Anthony Towns. You want to keep Rudy Gobert. Tyus Jones could be an answer and an option for him. You keep going down to like Spencer Dinwiddie. You got Markelle Fultz. You got Monty Morris from Detroit. You got Kyle Lowry. Again, $30 million. You can't afford a guy like Kyle Lowry. And then you go to, and I'm sorry for disrespecting his name, it's now Alvarez. It's Jose Alvarado. He's the guy that everybody knows. He stands in the corner, steals the ball coming up. He's only making like 1.8. So you could also make an offer to him to be a guy to come off your bench, because he too has an extension through June of 2024. He might get extended because of how cheap he is. But if the Timberwolves want to say, hey, let's get a defender in here, a guy that's going to be a mosquito. I mean, we are the state of mosquitoes. Bring a mosquito into this organization, and you put him with Tyus Jones, and now you have a solid like guard to come off the bench, and then you have Tyus Jones to lead the way if you don't want to pay $25 million for Mike Conley.
Yeah, Ben, let's get your thoughts to put a bow on this.
Yeah, I think actually a combination of the points that everybody makes is why I think they've got a real chance to keep him. I mean, Reggie brought up his age. He's not going to make a ton of money on a long-term deal because of his age. I also think that, yes, there's a lot of, he could make more money than 10 or 12 million, but the teams that are going to have that cap space, I'd have to go through a full list of exactly what next year's cap space looks like. And I haven't done that yet, but I bet they're not also teams that he has a shot at winning a title, right? Like the teams that have the cap space are going to be the Washingtons, teams like that. Like, is he going to take 20? First of all, is anybody going to give him $20 million for a year on a rebuilding team? Probably not, right? Like they're going to use that cap space to extend their own young players or whatever. And then the teams that would want him aren't going to have cap space either. So at that point, all things are equal, or if all things are equal, why wouldn't he just stay where he's at? He's obviously comfortable. He's a perfect fit for the system. And the Wolves, assuming no other major anything in the next year, they're going to be contenders for the next couple of seasons. So I don't know that he's going to get the opportunity to get 20 million and be on a team with a shot at making the playoffs, much less winning a championship. So why wouldn't he stay where he's at and get paid something, like Jack said, 8 to 10, maybe 12 million. And, then obviously the rest of the roster building, you're more likely to get vet minimums for good players when you're a good team. And the Wolves haven't been in that position in a really long time. So filling out the roster with vet minimum guys becomes more reasonable. I mean, look at Taurean Prince got half of what the Wolves would have given him or what he had with Minnesota to go to the Lakers. It's not LA. I get that, but you're going to get a better shot at those types of things. Plus, Tim Connelly's great at filling out his roster with second-round picks. Everybody seems to like the deep bench guys. Josh Minott, Leonard Miller, obviously don't play the same positions as Mike Conley, but if you're picking up, or I should say, Shake Milton or whoever else you'd end up losing, you can kind of backfill with some of those guys that are on those rookie deals, those non-guaranteed contracts. And if they don't work out, you pick up somebody on a vet minimum. So I think they're more likely than not to make it work with Conley and then figure out the rest of it later. And if all things are equal, Conley's going to come back to Minnesota. He's not going to get a lot more plus a chance to win somewhere else. And at this stage in his career, with his career earnings, he's far more likely to stick in Minnesota.
Hey, and Ben, I do want to give you a quick one. So the projected practical cap space in order right now would be the 76ers 1, Pistons 2, Orlando Magic, Toronto, and then Utah Jazz. Those are your top 5 options. So
yeah,
you're right.
So like a team like Orlando, maybe. Yeah. I'd have to look.
But Orlando already has a bunch of guards. Like, why would they want? They already have their
Sure.
guard tandem with what's his name, left-hand dude from North Carolina, and then you got Jalen Suggs. So, like you're right. Like, there's Cole-Anthony. Yeah, I just call him left-handed dude, light-skinned left-handed dude. But the Detroit Pistons too, like they're a dumpster fire, and they have too many guards. When you got Jaden Ivey coming off the bench, so. Yeah, like Mike Conley, you're right. At his age, the Timberwolves kind of could say, hey, man, like we're a contender, man. We're the best team in the West. He'd have to take less money for a team like the Bulls. The Knicks already have guards. The Nets, maybe. OKC because of that young core. But now you're dropping down into the 13, 14, 15 teams that have cap space for them. The Warriors, because people were saying they should trade Steph Curry to OKC. Dumbest thing ever. But yeah, you're right, man. Like, it's not, when you look at this cap space for next year, there's not a lot of options for them.
Right. And like the Sixers are going to have some cap space, but they're going to extend Tyrese Maxey. They've got, they got to figure out Tobias Harris. So, and obviously Maxey plays the same position. So like Conley's not going to take more. They're not going to give him more money than the Wolves would to be a backup, change cities for a team that probably has an equal chance at winning a title next season. So I mean, I think obviously it requires some maneuvering, but I think it's pretty likely that the Wolves figure it out.
Final minutes of the show. Here in the Minnesota Basketball Party, we're going to predict the week as we like to do each week. Wolves have Luka on Thursday on the road. Then they come home and play the most exciting team in the NBA, the Indiana Pacers and Tyrese Halliburton. And then they go
Ugliest
on the road.
Shot I've ever seen in my life.
Where, it's hideous. It's hideous, but it's effective. And then they go to South Beach where Jimmy Butler can sit out and avoid them again. Ron, start with you. At Mavs, home against Pacers, at Heat. How do the Wolves do this week?
Oh, I mean, am I thinking Anthony Edwards is going to play? Like, where are we going with this? Are we saying he's playing, or are we suspecting he's going to rest this week?
I'm guessing he doesn't play Thursday. I don't know about after that. You'll have to do your best.
So I think they could beat Dallas because no Kyrie. So if you can figure out just how to like multiple stop Luka, like that's you have to multiple stop Luka. You have to put multiple guys on him, force him to drive into more pressure. Don't let him do the slowest step back we've ever seen. That's the most effective step back we've ever seen. And I think they can beat them. Now, the Pacers are coming off their bubble in-season AAU tournament loss to the Lakers. I don't know what they're going to look like. They put a lot of energy into that game versus the Lakers. They almost had a chance to come back, and then they kind of blew it the Lakers ran away with it in the end. That's a tough one, but I think they might lose to them. I think they can beat the Heat, though. So I'm going to say 2-1.
All right. Ben?
Yeah, I have 2-1 as well. I think if Ant plays, I actually like the Mavs matchup for the Wolves, but Dallas is playing a lot better lately. So I'll say that Ant sits and they lose to Dallas, but I think they beat the Pacers and win in Miami.
Okay.
Jack?
3-0. I think that, this team is proven the ability to get up. I think the Mavs are the most overrated team in the NBA. All their guys went off last night. Luka Doncic is not going to have 17 assists with those same guys playing. The Wolves killed them both times they played them in Abu Dhabi. The Pacers, they've got two guys who can defend Halliburton. Indiana's front line hasn't stopped anyone this year, and the Heat could very well be without Bam Adebayo and Tyler Hero, who have both missed significant time of late. So, like the Wolves' chances here.
You know, it was a trip, by the way, taking the under in that Pacers-Bucks in-season tournament game. That was terrifying because they just they shoot with 18 seconds on the shot clock every time. Did cash it, though. Reggie, your thoughts on the week?
Yeah, I go 2-1 as well. I think they probably dropped to the Mavs, but I only say that because of what the Mavs just did to my Lakers. Like that was kind of crazy. If you're gonna get all this production from Dante Exum, like go ahead.
He's still a guy. He's still in the league.
Go ahead,
what?
Man. You got it.
I still have his Adidas Exum version shoes.
You played NBA 2K, what was that, 15, 17? When he was your rival in my career, he just killed you. I haven't heard of him since then.
Exactly. So he's hitting clutch buckets down the stretch for them. It was just like, come on. But yeah, I do think that they could beat the Pacers, and I also have them beating the Heat too. So yeah, 2-1.
All right, I'll be the lone pessimist. I'll go 1-2. I think we're in for the first little mini crisis of the season. Not even a crisis, just a tiny one, small one. It's a tough schedule, and the Wolves aren't gonna, win 68 games this year. So I think that it'll happen, but I think they'll right the ship shortly after. It's the Minnesota Basketball Party. Locked On Sports Minnesota. Find us on video or find us on audio in the Locked On Wolves feed, wherever you get your podcasts. Reggie Wilson, Carol Evan, Ron Johnson here on Locked On Sports Minnesota. He had Chris Carter on the Ron Johnson show yesterday. Go back and watch or listen to that. Ben Beecken, Locked On Wolves, Jack Borman, Candace Hoopus, and I'm Sam Ekstrom. Thanks for watching and listening here on Locked On Sports Minnesota. See ya.